somebody cries out for help and they want to leave that situation, we got to help with rental assistance. We've got to help with putting their life back together. We've got to help with making sure that they have a safe place where they can't be found. Job skills, helping them to find a job, helping them to take care of those immediate needs that anybody needs when they're getting up off the floor, so to speak. So what's key to this is making sure that we have the resources, and we know that COVID has made the situation much worse.
Right.
We don't know how bad it is, but we know that it has gotten a lot worse. So we want to make sure that we have the adequate resources so that when you call an organization that does this, and I work very closely with CAST, it's in Los Angeles, that when they call, that resource is there, that we can get them into an apartment, that we can get them into a hotel room, that we can get them fed, clothed, and the training necessary to be able to get out a job, that we have the wraparound support services, that we have the mentoring, that we have the mental health care services or the therapies, whatever it is that individual needs at that moment, and we want to meet them at that moment, we need to have the resources to do that.
Right.
And that's really what we're fighting for.
Hi, everyone. I am Kate Bosworth. Thank you for joining us today to talk about an issue that is very close to my heart, the fight against human trafficking, and how the COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated the problem here in California. I have two incredibly special guests with me today, Kay Buck, CEO of the Coalition to Abolish Slavery and Trafficking, aka CAST, and Lorena, a survivor of human trafficking, who will share her perspective on the deep impact the pandemic is having on survivors' lives in California. Thank you both for joining me today.
Thank you, Kate.
It's such an honor to be speaking with you both. And I thought to begin, I could give a little bit of context as to how I'm involved in the fight against human trafficking, and how I know you, Kay, and you, Lorena, as well. So that, anyone who's listening in can understand the connection here. So I produced a movie called Nona, which is it's a narrative feature about a girl who was sex trafficked from San Pedro Sula, Honduras, all the way through Guatemala, through Mexico, and across the border into the United States. And my husband wrote and directed this feature, and we decided to make it because we had heard a sort of breaking news story on the radio about a sex house that had been busted not so far from where we live in Los Angeles. And we were incredibly shocked to realize and learn and understand that this was happening essentially on our doorstep. And I think that one of the huge misconceptions that a lot of people have in the United States is that this is something that happens somewhere else, and that it's not happening here, near our homes, on our doorsteps. And so, Michael and I set out to tell what we had hoped to be an effective narrative for audiences to better understand the why and the how that this can happen to one person, as I think we often see and hear in the news the sort of results, like we had, like a house had been busted, or victims have been identified. And we thought, if we could invite audience members, if we could invite people to have some empathy and connect the humanity to human trafficking, then perhaps we can affect change in some way. And I realized very quickly, though it was a pure intention to do something through an artistic lens to affect change, we realized very quickly that we needed more education, more knowledge, more connections in this space. And we were introduced to Kay Buck, the phenomenal, brilliant, just frontline warrior Kay Buck, and the incredible organization of CAST. And so that was how we got connected. And then we started really working together.
It was great.
And it was really, she's a force. And anyone who knows me knows that I just, especially female, force of nature, is those are the beacons I will always be drawn to. And you are just, you're on the front lines, Kay, every single day. We are so grateful for you.
Oh, thank you.
The superwoman.
Oh, thank you both for that. Well, I have a whole team at CAST who are frontline workers, people who are running our shelters that are so important always, but especially now because of the pandemic, and a 24-hour hotline, and just legal services, so many services that survivors really need in order to escape from traffickers and receive trauma-informed care so that they can heal from the trauma. So it was great working with you too, Kate, because we got to raise awareness, right, to a whole lot of people who really didn't know that trafficking was happening right under our noses, right here in Los Angeles and throughout California. So, and what I loved about your film was that it really authentically captured the different ways that victims can be and are manipulated by both the recruiters as well as the traffickers. And, that was pre-COVID, right? Imagine what survivors or victims are going through now during COVID-19, where that manipulation, that force, that fraud and coercion that traffickers use to exploit people for, commercial sex and forced labor.
Mm-hmm. Let's take it back to the very beginning, because I feel like, and I'll raise my hand and say I was included in this. I sort of generally knew what human trafficking was. When I started to embark on the making of our movie. But I'd love to hear from you, who's obviously such an expert from UK. What is human trafficking?
Yeah, it's real. Simply put, it is an exploitation of a human being through force, fraud, and coercion for the purpose of forced labor or commercial sex. And when it's someone who's under 18, a child, you don't need to have force or fraud or coercion. It is automatically trafficking. And so what that looks like is people are forced into industries like the hospitality industry. So we've had cases in restaurants, in hotels, domestic servitude. We've had cases on farms in agriculture. So I think that's important to really educate people on, because most people do think of it in terms of sex trafficking, which also is a big part of our cases here at CAST and throughout California. It's also forced labor.
Can you help us understand the difference between slavery and trafficking?
Yeah, well, we use it interchangeably. And so essentially human trafficking is a form of modern slavery where, again, people are exploited for forced labor or commercial sex. And so, another thing that's important for our listeners to hear is that it happens at every age. We've definitely served children, but we've also served women who are in their 70s and also men and boys. And so it's really important to understand that this issue really reaches everyone. No one is really immune from it. But what we know for sure, when people are vulnerable, like they are today because of the pandemic, that is when human trafficking is on the rise. And that's when people who are already marginalized in communities in California, they're that much more vulnerable to the tricks and the lies that traffickers tell them.
Yeah. Obviously, this was incredibly surprising for me to learn, and I'm sure a lot of people listening in will be surprised to hear this as well. But human trafficking in California is a huge problem, right?
It is. It's known as a hotspot, sadly. So, there's a lot of reasons for that. We have a really large homeless population. We have a large youth homeless population. We have ports and airports and borders. We have a significant immigrant population that in many cases are marginalized. So it does make them vulnerable to recruiters and traffickers. And so, we're one of the top areas in California where trafficking occurs. It happens in urban areas in California. It also happens in rural areas. We've handled cases in the Central Valley, in Northern California, Southern California. So it really does span the entire state.
Yeah, I remember you and I talking one day, and you said something to me like, I guarantee you walk by several people who are being trafficked a day, like on the street. You just don't know it. And that sort of blew my mind, because I think that, we often get, sort of wound into the statistical side of human trafficking and those sort of overwhelming numbers and the sort of, billion-dollar industry that it is globally. But to really understand the humanity of that, this is happening to people. And obviously we're going to speak to Lorena soon, but it's something that I think is an easy othering for people, like, oh, that's just someone else. And it's this sort of like faceless, nameless, vague thing that you kind of know about. And yes, it's terrible, but it's not your problem. And like, when you start to connect the humanity of, no, this is happening to human beings, sisters, brothers, daughters, sons. And I think that that's such an important aspect to not divorce the word human from human trafficking.
That's right. Oh, you make an excellent point, Kate. That's so true. I mean, I remember working with a woman who was a mom, and trafficking was happening right next door to her home where she lived with her family. And it changed their life. The whole family now are activists alongside CAST because of that experience. So it happens in very affluent areas in LA and throughout California. It also happens in not affluent areas, right? So it could happen at the bus shelter where someone is being recruited for trafficking as you're driving by, or you might pass a trafficking survivor or victim in a market somewhere, or on their way taking the children of the trafficker to school. It happens in so many different scenarios that you're right. People actually come across victims of trafficking and they just don't know it. And I will say too, we did this really important survey a few years ago with one of our key supporters who's a doctor, Dr. Susie Baldwin. And we found in surveying survivors who had already escaped how many times they were taken to a clinic or a hospital, because we felt like we weren't doing enough awareness in healthcare settings. And sure enough, when we did that study, the number of interventions that could have happened in hospitals or in a healthcare setting were enormous. And so that's when we started partnering more with the health industry. And it's stuff like that where I don't think people realize just how common it is, how prevalent it is, and that it's happening in neighborhoods, even in their own neighborhood. So you're right, we need to address more, connect more the humanness around human trafficking so that people understand everyone has a role to play to help more victims get to safety and get the services they need and they deserve, and to also prevent this from happening in the first place. And that's what this, budget request is all about.
I was just going to say, and in order for you to be able to do so, you need support in monetary support and many different ways of support, but certainly in this new budget. Lorena, hello, lovely. You're listening. I love that. So I really want to thank you, my darling, for joining us as an advocate who is fighting for the rights of survivors. And thank you for sharing your expertise with us so that we can learn from you and ensure funding is available to serve survivors in every corner of the state.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I always like to introduce anyone who we're having like a very open conversation with, that it takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable and to expose your life and your story. So, we're so grateful to you for being here today and for being an advocate.
Yes.
Would you, again, I guess we can bring it back to the start. What can you tell us about your experience with human trafficking?
Guys, my experience for the human trafficking is so really, really scary. My experience, because I escaped my employer 3 o'clock in the morning. I just disguise I wear a black, then I get out the house. There's somebody rescue to me in the corner, my friends. And even when you walk outside, like you are, every time you walk, you see side by side, maybe your trafficker is there in your next to you. And yeah, like you have a anxiety, you can't sleep, because you never know what they want you did for you, because they are close to the politics in the Philippines. That's why I'm so really scared, and my family there in the Philippines. Then the cause is very, very helpful for me to change my life. What happened to me? They rescued me from Arizona to come back here in LA.
And what are, if you were to describe the aspects of CAST that helped you most, what would you say?
I guess the most cause helped me change my life, first of all, and reuniting with my kids.
Right.
And they have a 24 hours care and shelter and hotline.
How did they help you reunite with your children? What was that like? That sounds like so beautiful.
Right.
Oh my goodness! It changed my life when I go there at the shelter. Oh my God! Then like I have a turn in my head. Then when I get in the shelter, oh my God, it feels good. I feel safe and peace of mind, and like I'm free when I come into the cast. Then every day, then they have a 24 care with us. They have a nighttime. They have a duty, somebody duty there in the shelter. Then my food. Then they can give me a phone card to call my family. Oh my God! Then I'm so very happy when I call my family, but I don't tell my family what happened to me. I don't tell them what happened, my situation. Then I'm going to the school, the learn English, but I don't know my English. I don't know my English is that good.
It's great, Lorena. Don't worry, it's great.
And sometimes we going out, we walking. Then we have a event in the shelter. We have a dinner together. It's so really, really fantastic. My life when I was in the shelter, I never forget that in my life, because without Cass, I'm not like this. I don't get my children. Yeah. In my heart, Cass in my heart forever.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I feel this. I feel the love. I feel the support.
Yeah, Cass, then family Cass is so really, really supportive for everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they also helped with work permits as well, right, Lorena?
Yeah. When I get my working permit, oh my God, I'm so happy. Then I can work. I said, oh, I can support my family, especially my children, bring to college. But my elder daughter, she finished college there in the Philippines. But my 4 of them is here in America.
And Charles, right?
Yeah, Charles right now, she's just a grade 8th grade.
Charles, the tall one.
Yes.
and the baby who's almost 6 feet tall.
Yeah.
That baby is almost 6 feet tall.
Yeah, he's only 2 pounds now. My God, he's 5'11".
And because I hear this word family so often from the work that I've done with UK at CAST and meeting different survivors. So this isn't, Lorena's story is unique as it's her own story, but this feeling of family and support and grounding and foundation is unique to CAST, and what you and everyone who works with you gives to survivors of human trafficking. So I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about what that experience was like with Lorena, and how you felt CAST supported her, and how generally they support other survivors of human trafficking.
Yeah, I think, that's why service providers play such a key role in the life of a survivor of trafficking, because it's comprehensive care. So yes, there's crisis intervention that is crucial, helping people escape out of that situation, to get away from the trafficker, to do the safety assessment to make sure not only they are safe, but their family, their kids are safe too. That's crucial.
Right.
But that's when the real work starts, right? I always tell people that, okay, once we've helped people to escape, we have them in the shelter, and they're safe, and we know their family is safe, then the survivor and my team get to work on setting goals. And a lot of times that's addressing trauma, making sure that their health and mental health are okay. We have people who come to us who have literally been nearly starved to death, right, by the traffickers. And so you can imagine the health issues and the mental health issues that people have when they go to a service provider initially. And it takes, about 1.5 to 2 years on average. That's how long most survivors stay with us in our shelter program and in our other programs. But our job is to wrap around these services through trauma-informed care, to make sure that we're addressing the trauma, making sure that they're ready to get a job, to be able to support themselves. That's why all of this is so important.
And even like attorneys as well, Kay. I mean, I don't think, for people listening, it's sort of, I think that it's such a great point where you think, okay, once victims of human trafficking are identified and freed, then they're free.
Yeah.
And it's exactly what you said, which is no. There's a whole rehabilitation. There's a legal system to deal with. There's housing, there's food, there's family reunion. I mean, there's so much to support the life of victims of human trafficking.
That's right. Exactly. It's health, it's legal issues. They really, imagine being trafficked for 4 years like Lorena. So 4 years was that. And all the things that happen when people are trafficked. Oftentimes our clients are forced to commit crimes as part of the trafficking. So the traffickers will force them to do things that they don't want to do. But as a result, they have an arrest record. So we have to expunge that as well. We have to make sure that their kids are safe. So we reunify. There's a lot of legal work that goes into all of these services to make people whole again. And you're right. I think a lot of people think of this as shelter and a hotline. And that is a very important part of it. But it's so much more comprehensive than that. And it's why service providers need additional funding, especially now through the pandemic, not just for the urgent human trafficking cases. Like, just to give you an example, I've heard reports all up and down the state where people are seeing a 62% increase, 170% increase. In LA, we've seen a 455% increase in expenses. And in terms of urgent human trafficking cases to our hotline, we've seen 185% increase in urgent human trafficking cases. So keep in mind, those are cases that we're helping people escape, but they need the rehabilitation. They need to have those comprehensive services through the recovery of the pandemic. Otherwise, they will be homeless. That is essentially what we're talking about here, is preventing re-exploitation of trafficking and preventing homelessness of trafficking survivors.
I'm just going to underscore a percentage that you just said, which is 554. Is that right?
455% more.
400. Okay, so I'm going to underscore 455.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
That's the number. Okay, so I'm going to underscore a number that you just said, 455%.
Yeah.
Higher.
Yeah.
That funding that you need.
Yeah.
Right now during the pandemic, because it is so absolutely critical and necessary. So now that we have given people a little bit of a understanding of human trafficking, what it is, the impact of human trafficking on just a regular day, I want to sort of pivot to COVID-19 because I'm sure, look, everyone's experienced some kind of vulnerability within this pandemic.
Right.
Everyone understands the challenges, how difficult it is, how it's affected everyone's lives. I cannot imagine how this pandemic has affected the most vulnerable people
Mm-hmm.
of our societies.
Mm-hmm.
Help me understand that a little bit more, put some context to it. How has COVID-19 impacted human trafficking survivors and anti-human trafficking service providers in California?
It's impacted them so deeply, Kate. And Lorena can talk about her own experience with COVID-19 shortly. But for our clients and for survivors throughout the state, they are experiencing job loss, or their hours are cut back so severely they can't make rent, they can't pay their bills, they can't feed their families. And so they're really at risk for homelessness. Their health, they're having severe mental health issues because of the pandemic. They're worried about getting it because so many survivors, even after they escape, work in industries where they oftentimes are essential workers, right? And so through this pandemic, it's been, either they're sheltered in place with the trafficker and fearing their lives, but they don't want to leave because they don't know what's open. They don't know where to go for help. And then
I can't even. It's
Yeah.
just to jump in. It's like to talk about just life as we know it. I mean, I would hear people say, "Oh, I don't know where to get a coffee."
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
I don't know where to. I don't know. I can only get takeout at certain places. Like, I can't imagine if you're looking for help of survival right now.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, and I will tell you, when the shelter in place orders first happened, we saw a bit of like a dip in our hotline calls. And I remember my team and I talked about this saying, oh my gosh, survivors are trapped. They don't know that we're open. They don't know about essential businesses like CAST and other service providers that remained open the whole time.
Right.
And we just did our work differently, so we had to do this pivot like all essential businesses had to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so then it took about a week. And then that's when our numbers completely shot up. So we just doubled down on doing outreach that would be appropriate for a pandemic, and got word out on the street that our shelter was open. We actually did a pivot. We took over an entire hotel, Kate. And
Wow.
That's how we were able to safely quarantine survivors and their kids, their families, and my staff, who were still there 24/7 helping survivors.
Right, because you would have to create some kind of safety, a bubble, I assume.
Yeah, that's right.
So you were also working under these extreme circumstances. Yeah, that's insane.
That's right. And then, so that was the emergency cases that we were still receiving an increase of. And then in addition to that, our already existing client base, our survivors who were already in our care, 50% of them, more than 50% of them lost their jobs or their hours were cut back. And so we needed to raise money for rental assistance, to pay bills, to make sure that people had Wi-Fi so their kids could still go to school. I mean, the expenses were so immense, and we were not alone in that. All of the service providers who are taking care of survivors of trafficking and their families throughout the state experienced the same thing.
Wow, that's amazing, and I'm so grateful to you and to CAST for being able to pivot under such circumstances and provide the support, which we also know takes money and real dedication from the people who can allocate certain budgets to allow you to keep doing the service work that you're doing. Before we get to that, I wanted to just ask Lorena. I imagine that you have been impacted from COVID-19, specifically having had certain trauma in your life, specifically being in captivity in your life. And there you find yourself in the midst of COVID-19, again, sort of having this strange kind of captive feeling. And I was wondering, Lorena, if you could tell us a little bit about how COVID-19 impacted your life.
Yeah, my experience in the COVID-19, when I start the panic attack, I called 911 when I was in my job because I take the bus every day. I said in my mind, it's my negative thoughts, I said, oh my God, maybe I'm go home. I got the COVID. because I take the bus. Even you take a mask, you have a mask, you're not sure what's going on. Then when I was in the morning in my job, I mean, when I'm coming there, I feel I can breathe. Like it's difficult breathing. I said, what happened for me? Then until I'm shaking all my body, my numb is come up my legs, 2 legs, and my arms, 2 arms. Then I call my employer, sister. I said, I need help. Can you call 911? Then she called 911. When she called 911, then the 911 coming, but she told me, relax and drink water, my employer sister. Then the 911 coming, then they bring me outside. They don't want to go inside, because they just be careful. Maybe somebody have a COVID inside the house. So then when I got the 911, I sit down, they check everything, my vital sign. Everything is fine. Just except my blood pressure is a little high because I'm so nervous. Then they tell me you relax and you think about, you distract yourself. Maybe you can watch movie, but you can't control yourself. Is the panic attack coming? It's it's not easy to say just relax and you can't just, oh my God, I close my eyes, and I guess praying is the best in your panic attack. You have to focus to praying, then you come down a little bit and deep breath. And that until I got my hours to finish my hours, then the 911, you don't go to the emergency room. It's so really bad right now in the hospital because there's a lot of people there have a COVID. I said, okay, then I'm not going to the 911. Then I just go back to inside and relax until I finish my 8 hours duty. Then, my duty 8 hours. But
so Lorena, were you still able to work during the pandemic?
Yeah, I'm still working every day until my employer passed away, because nobody can take her with her. But I just make us strong myself. If I'm not working, how to pay my rent, how to buy the food.
One of the aspects that I found so unique and important about CAST is that you do create a community. You do create an opportunity for survivors to participate in many different ways in the organization and to really create a bond, because it is something that is such a specific experience, such a specific traumatizing experience, that to create a community of people who can really connect and grow and become empowered from, I think is really incredible.
Support each other.
Yeah, that's the key, right? So even when people graduate from our shelter program or any program, they do join this community, and, we all really celebrate birthdays together, getting driver's license, birth of children. And that's important because everyone needs a community to lean on.
But the best, everybody get the green card.
That was a great celebration. Celebration. Well, we'll be able to resume that when this is over and we can meet safely in person, Lorena. That's going to be our goal, to have a big celebration of all that we're all safe and healthy and doing well. So long as we get this funding.
So Assembly Member Santiago is fighting for $10 million in emergency state funding for human trafficking victims as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. How would that help people trying to escape trafficking in California? Why is this funding so important, Kay?
It is truly life or death out there. So number one, it's helping victims escape traffickers right now who are being trafficked. So it's resources that service providers need to operate a 24-hour care hotline or a shelter in order for victims to have a place to go. That is on the line right now. I have heard reports that some of the service providers have had to decrease their number of hours of the hotline or the shelter. Some have had to close their doors because the demand is just so great out there. So this one-time funding will make sure that everyone is open to receive survivors during this pandemic and the aftermath. in order to get the care that they need. So it handles the emergency, urgent human trafficking cases. This money will also help to provide the trauma-informed care that survivors need once they're safe from the traffickers. They're going to need care. They need to have their health looked at, their mental health looked at. They need to get jobs. They need to be able to get safe housing. And that's the job of the service providers to do that. And again, this $10 million is so small compared to the impact that it will have in communities throughout the whole state. And last but not least, this is a prevention measure. By having this money in place, the service providers can ensure that survivors are not being re-exploited or re-trafficked. And that's really important too. So it's doing an intervention in emergency cases. It's helping people heal from the trauma of trafficking and making sure that they're safe and healthy. And it's also preventing trafficking from happening in the first place. And I think that $10 million, this one-time funding, is worth it to make sure that the communities in up and down the state in California are safe.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about some of the most vulnerable people in our community suffering in a seriously difficult and compromising time. I mean, this is the most vulnerable of the vulnerable. And surely Governor Newsom would want to help and make sure that human trafficking victims are not left behind in COVID-19 budget relief, right? Like, I can't imagine that he wouldn't be supporting this.
That's right, because this is the only population that really isn't being targeted for funding right now, and they so need it, Kate. You're right. This is a vulnerable population, and we have to stand up and make sure that they're not left out of the budget this year, of all years. So very important. And
yeah, I mean, this is a time of, I feel like, the pandemic has given us, I feel, such a deeper sense of empathy, a deeper sense of connectivity and humanity. We were able to stop for a minute and really lend a hand in any way that we could to people that we didn't even know. I feel like it was a real moment of looking outward and being able to find generosity and love and kindness to our neighbors, to each other. And I would just, I really, really hope the governor, is aligned here with the vulnerable society of those who are victims of human trafficking. I can't imagine that he won't. So I hope that's the case.
I hope so too. That is exactly why we're, doing this today, to urge the governor, who has supported anti-trafficking legislation and victim protections before. We're asking him to do this year, this one-time $10 million that would go such a long way to help survivors in every corner of the state.
So what can people listening right now do to help? How can they make sure that they help us in this fight?
I'm glad you asked, Kate, because let's take action, everyone, together. So please, today, call the governor's office and ask them to pass this emergency budget funding for human trafficking survivors. The number I will give to you, 916-445-2841. Please call today. Another thing you can do is call the Assembly Budget Committee. They're in charge of the budget, and their number is 916-319-2009. Tell them that you strongly support the emergency COVID-19 funding for human trafficking survivors.
Please join us and ask him, implore him to pass emergency budget funding for human trafficking victims. It will go a long way. It's a small amount that will make a huge difference. We can't allow human trafficking victims to be the only group left out of emergency funding for COVID-19 budget relief. Thank you all for joining us. Kay, Lorena, it's my absolute pleasure and my honor, and I have so much love and respect for the both of you.
Same here, Kate. All the love and respect back. Thank you so much.
Thank you both.
Thank you. We got this funding.